Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your host from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, it is that time of the year, business planning time. Right now we're in late December 23, about to go into January 24. And around this time, and it's kind of an ongoing process. We start our business planning and it kind of continues into probably mid-January. And the first thing we do is take a look at 2023. Take a look at the year we've just completed. Obviously, we've been in business for a while now, so a lot of things are pretty consistent. There's some definite fluctuations in, loan volume, units, loan type, percentage of defaults, the amount of capital accessible on the sideline, all kinds of stuff that we're going to take a look at now to see what we can improve next year.
Yeah, and we're going to go through some of our 2024 goals here towards the end of this episode. So make sure you stick around to the end and you will hear that. Depending on your background in private lending or hard money lending, the size of your operation will obviously depend on what your goals are for this upcoming year. But keep in mind, think big, right? Think big, but think realistic. Chris and I had a business coach years ago that we did goal setting for when we were early on in HMB days. And we put together what we thought were these big, outrageous goals that were in essence, 10-year goals that we were able to hit in 3.5 or 4 years just by doing the block and tackle each and every day. And, in essence, just kind of grinding inside our business and hustling to get to that spot. So, again, depending on where you want to be, you'd be able to set your goals. But typically when you're doing that goal setting, maybe start off by 5 years from now and, cut that in half of, okay, and in order for me to be here and call it 2029, where do I need to be in 2027 and 2025 and 4 and things like that. And it really breaks it down into something very, very simple. Remember, in this space, every day you got to be raising capital. Every day you got to be finding deals. Just, there's no negotiation on that. To run a lending company, you need capital and you have deals. And if you have, unlimited capital at your disposal, well, that's great. Now go find deals. So you have unlimited deals and deal flow, at your disposal. And if you feel that you have that in place, then let's tune in on your operations and your processes to make your life, easier. And in order to do so, because how a $2 million or $3 or $4 million operation functions and flows is different than a $10 million operation or a $30 million operation or a $100 million operation. So again, figure out where you are in that mix so you know what you need to do to get to the next stage.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Tony Mayo, our first business coach, because I wanted to mention a couple of those things too. I want to kind of emphasize what you said about a lot of the things that we did with Tony. And mind you, we were a few years into HMB, maybe 4 years, call it something like that. We had a growing operation and we wanted to run it the right way. We wanted to not screw it up, basically, because we were on a growth trajectory. And there was stuff, we were probably in our early 30s at the time that we just hadn't experienced yet in terms of running and growing a real organization. And the goal setting stuff that Jason mentioned was very, very helpful. So the different buckets of goals, the different aspects of life and the goals you have in each, starting with that 5-year plan out and then working your way down to this year was a super, super effective exercise. And it definitely came true, something that Tony Robbins always says, that people tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year and way underestimate what they can do in 10. And those 5-year goals that we were talking about, we ended up hitting in 2 or 3. Right. And that was super cool. Another thing that I thought was a good exercise that we did with Tony back then was what he calls a trailing 12 months. And in that, you take a spreadsheet and you pick 3 metrics that you want to track within your business. And for us, it was loan volume, bottom line profit, and contacts added to our database each month. And so every month you make a new tab and you update it, and then you look back. That's why it's called trailing 12 months. And you see the trend of these metrics over the past year on a running year basis, which is, I thought, a really, really cool thing. And some people might not expect those exact. It's going to be different for everyone and what your goals are. But those we thought were 3 important metrics in different aspects of the company that, in essence, like defined what we were trying to grow in a simple way, because simple's best, right? And yeah, I mean, people have different goals. Like there are people who we know well in the inner circle group, for example, that want to get to $2 or $3 million of their own money deployed in the next year. And that's a great goal. If that's your goal, it's a great one, right? And then there are other people who want to get to, in the next few years, a $20 million portfolio. Some of the people in like the 5 and 7 million range. And that, we were saying, does require growth in all areas. If you're trying to move your organization and your portfolio that much, that means new capital, that means new borrowers and new deals and a legitimate marketing plan, and it means hiring. And what are the right people that you want in place? That could be a great goal for this year too. Like, say you're making your first hire in your private lending operation and you want them to, say, process and prepare your loans for closing and also handle the accounting. That's oftentimes a common first hire, and something that we work through with some inner circle members as well. And that's a great goal. And we know a couple guys we work closely with, they made their first hire about halfway through 23, and it completely changed their operation in a great way from like June of 23 to December.
Yeah. And one kind of easy hack to set this up is, as you're writing down goals, you can make them kind of like large, medium, and smaller goals. And I'll give you an example of stuff that we've done and do. So we'll have like one major goal, right? A major goal could be like expand into another market, open up a new office, maybe, hire your first employer, your next employee, something that, like, if you just hit that and that alone in the next year, that would have been a success, right? So it's like one really, really big goal, and then like 4 medium-sized goals. And typically, like, we use the word 4, or the number 4, because it's like once a quarter, right? So you have like, one big goal a quarter, one big goal a year, and then you have some little goals, throughout each month, right? So like one for a quarter could be like create a new website, launch, a big ad campaign, something like that, expand into a different market, things like that. So, think about that. If you have one huge goal a year that you accomplish, you have 4 quarterly goals that you accomplish, plus you sprinkle in a bunch of other little goals throughout the month, each month, like, that is a freaking success, right? So, challenge yourself to do something along those lines. We could talk about some of the goals that we have written down, and mine can be different than Chris, right? Even though they're aligned collectively, we can still have different ones. So on our end, it's more commercial lending, right? We've been lending on commercial properties, not just fix and flip properties, for a long time, and we want to continue to expand on those. They're typically bigger loan amounts. They're typically good assets with right qualified borrowers. They typically perform nicely. So more commercial lending in general. Also doing more of leveraging other private lenders in other markets, which is something that we've done. And in essence, we've been leverage pieces for other private lenders in different geographical areas that we like. Instead of us potentially lending there ourselves or creating offices, we've acted as leverage pieces and leveraged other private lenders' capital. And had a profit split on deals like that. So we want to obviously continue and grow that. We're going to continue and growing our marketing efforts to get the best of all of our local deals. That's always been, a thing for us, is just get the best of the best of the best local deals. Marketing, branding, advertising, everything we can locally to capture that market space, and continuing to be opportunistic. That's one thing that we were always, I don't want to say sheltered. That's not the right word, but like over the last few years, we've looked outside the box a little bit and been a little bit more opportunistic. And, we did some joint venture partnerships on some bigger commercial projects. We were limited partners on a dozen plus commercial assets and kind of unique real estate assets. So just kind of, did some angel investing deals, things like that. So just being opportunistic, not necessarily jumping into anything, if it's not the right fit, but figure out what the right fit is, and just be opportunistic in general. And then related to our mastermind group and to our private lenders podcast, we want to continue to grow it. We want to grow our listener base. We want to grow our YouTube channel to, in essence, stay in front of more private lenders and hard money lenders and help them grow. We've got 2,500 plus lenders in the Hard Money Mastermind group online. We've got 25 in the inner circle. And we want to obviously grow those groups and in essence provide as much value as possible. Because who knows what happens, right? If you're providing value to anybody, you never know how it's going to kind of directly impact you kind of in the future. And you've heard Chris and I joke about this. We're talking about private lending and hard money lending every day together. It's all we talk about, is this space. So this gives us an outlet and a channel on the YouTube channel, on iTunes, on Spotify, and inside the Hard Money Mastermind group to share what we have going on in real time with everybody.
Yeah, and one tip or hack, guys, before we wrap up here related to goal setting for the next year is that I know that the exercise going through that can seem a little intimidating because it seems like you're putting this on paper, it's set in stone, you're married to these goals, and it can intimidate you. So what I've done for the past handful of years and still did last year is that I always label when I'm making out my personal goals, business goals, investing goals, other personal stuff, I call it a brainstorm. 2023 Goals Brainstorm is a document that I made at the beginning of this year. And I call it brainstorm because I don't want it to be too intimidating. I don't want it to be set in stone. Things can change, right? Like it's not a life or death situation. It's goal planning, right? So don't be too afraid of it. And I just use that term and that approach to it to soften it up a little bit and make it a little more manageable, a little more easy to swallow. And you know what? That thing is still up. We're in the office now, but in my home office, it stayed up on my browser. I have a bunch of tabs open and constantly what I'm doing on the big screen. It stayed up all year. It's still there now. I wrote it in January and it's still there. And, once a week or something like that, I'll go take a look at it and just kind of check in on how things are going relative to the goals that I put down as a brainstorm, right? So hopefully that can help some people out there as they are putting these things on paper, which you definitely need to do. It can be physical paper, it can be typed out, it can be a spreadsheet, whatever it is, it just needs to be out of your head in somewhere. It could be on a whiteboard. Like the likelihood of your goals coming to fruition increases dramatically if it's on paper and out of your head. And you can look at it and refer back to it in the end of the year, see how you did. So hopefully you guys got some value from this podcast. We totally appreciate you listening. And if you haven't done so already, go create a free account at hardmoneymastermind.com, and we will see you in there.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.